What's going on, guys? It's the Bearded One back with another beer review. This is actually take two, so there's not going to be a pour in this video. Unfortunately, a pizza delivery girl, came to the wrong address. There's two 15th Avenues in my city, and I live on one of them, so sometimes we get delivery people coming to the wrong address. Nevertheless, I digress. We are doing Stone IPA. It's a classic example of a West Coast style IPA. In fact, it's one of the original IPAs there was in the country. They have a little video package about it. It's like 2.5 minutes, little quick history lesson on the beer. The owner talked about how it was a hard sell at first because, this beer originally was created in 1997. And if you're old enough to kind of understand where craft beer came from, the 70s and 80s was really, that's when when craft beer even existed, was the 70s and 80s. And then in the 90s, there was a little traction. I believe Sierra Nevada came about in the 90s. Stone came about. Sam Adams had some time put in by the 90s. The 90s, I like to say, and I'm only 30, I didn't drink beer in the 90s, so feel free to comment with any history lessons on the 90s. But from my understanding and my research and what I think I know about beer, I just like to think of the 90s as just the bedrock underneath the foundation of craft beer that I consider the mid 2000s to kind of be the early to mid 2000s of the last decade. I consider that to be the foundation for the house that craft built on top of that foundation and became what it is now in 2019, soon to be 2020. IPAs are everywhere. They have double, triple. Bell's Brewery even has a quadruple IPA. You have contract brewers like Omnipolo doing milkshake IPAs. There's in fact a wonderful brewery, 1.5 to 2 hours south of me, called Trendsetter in Birmingham, Alabama. And they make a traditional IPA, and then they also make several of these like milkshake, hazy IPAs. It's just everywhere. IPA has just dominated the market. And it's just all too much for me sometimes. I don't even remember liking an IPA until last year. I can't remember what that IPA was, but I'm just a purist. It's just nice to go back to something like this that is, it even says on the can right here, the iconic West Coast style IPA. So as a beer nerd, like historian, I'm really excited to be drinking and reviewing like one of the first IPAs. They even mentioned that in their video package. I don't know if I said that earlier, about it being one of the original IPAs that was canned and sold nationally. So it's been around for a while. It's got some history. I don't know if they ever tweaked the recipe. I'm pretty sure they didn't tweak the recipe though, because the owner in the video mentioned that they got this right the first time. A little bit of tidbit for you. So here's the beer. There will be no pour because, again, like I said, people don't know how to do their job and they come to the wrong address with food you didn't order, and you have to stop your video and re-record. So there's no pour. The head retention was pretty good in my opinion. As you can see, as I've rambled, and this is take two, I barely took any sips out of the first time when I poured it. It's still there. There's legs on the beer for days. This beer has long legs. I wonder how much. 6.9% alcohol. I thought so. That it was going to be a heavier alcohol percent IPA. look at those. It just leaves the legs, and the head's sitting on there even after I've drank it. I've learned that legs and head retention is the mark of a good beer. You know, if your head dissipates, that's not really a good thing, unless you're like super heavy beers don't leave a lot of head. Anyways, I digress. Let's get into the aroma. Yeah, I get that grassy, piney, poppiness, I guess. There's several hops. I know Chinook's one. I'm not gonna try and they use several. I mean, it was like 5, 6, 7 hop varieties in this. And they were not hop varieties that I'm not very familiar with. Excuse me, it's been a long day. So I like that. I like when breweries are using unique strands and different names that I may have never even heard of. You know, how many times am I going to have a Centennial hopped beer? You know, it's nice to have something different. I want to say before I get into describing this beer and rating it and reviewing it that this beer was brewed on January 1st of this year, not January 31st of 2020. So this beer is 11 months old. It's supposed to be drank by May 31st of 2019, but you know what? I don't care. I will say as a disclaimer, you should drink your IPAs fresh. Hops take the most damage in a beer as a beer ages, and IPAs are hop forward beers, obviously, so you want to drink them fresh to get the full experience of an IPA. However, I bought this beer to review it because I picked it up at Walmart. I don't even like to shop at Walmart. I don't like to buy beer at Walmart unless I want something pretty generic and well known. But I just happened to look over and I saw this in a single. I've never had Stone IPA. I'm trying to like Stone IPA. And yeah, I figured for $2, why not pick it up and give it a review? So what did I get in the aroma when I sniffed it? Well, I got that pininess. I definitely got the earthiness, and then there's grapefruit. Grapefruit tends to be the dominant flavor in the citrusy stuff. But I have had, I even reviewed it. I had a hop forward beer that had more lemon. I think it was that Sierra Nevada Unfiltered Pills, the Southern Gothic. That seemed to be more of a lemon, but this seems to be more of a grapefruit character. I think if I tricked my brain and I really wanted to think that there was orange in here, maybe I can smell orange, but I really am going to claim it as grapefruit because that's what I'm getting is grapefruit. Not getting a lot much else. Yeah, I think maybe I get a little bit of the malt. There's a little bit of sourness there, but I always get some kind of like underlying tart, bitter, sour thing when it comes to the citrusy stuff. But I think they're just supposed to be sour anyways. It's more of like a tanginess instead of like drinking a sour. So let's get into the best part of the beer review. So yeah, for 7-8 month old IPA, the hops are still in here. They haven't completely faded away. I had a Goose Island IPA that I'm pretty dang sure, I'm not kidding you, I think it was 3 years old. 3 years old. It was just a regular old Goose Island IPA. And there was, I mean, the hops were there. I mean, it felt like I was drinking a German beer with the, you know, the subtle German hops that they only use for bittering. It was there. I definitely tasted more in this IPA. I think a lot of that has to do with it being in a can versus a glass, though. All right, one more time, just so I can decipher everything I've drank. So yeah, it's still pretty bitter. I mean, this isn't a double or a triple or a quad. So for an IPA, just a regular old IPA, it's definitely more bitter than a pale ale, like it should be. But it's not burning my palate. I'm looking for the IBUs. I don't think, yeah, they don't disclose the IBUs. Shot in the dark, and I'm no expert at this. Shot in the dark, I would put this at 70, 60, between 60 and 70 IBUs. It's up there. I mean, it's kind of bitter, but it just doesn't fry your tongue. It's definitely that piney gray. I don't want to say piney, because I had a spruce tip pine stripe from Dogfish Head, and that definitely had that tree piney flavor, and this doesn't. This is more like a lemongrass, or some kind of grassy flavor that I'm getting. And then, I mean, it's just kind of grapefruity. It's not as grapefruity as in the aroma. I think that just kind of, like, your centerpiece is all the grass, and I think the grass and the earthiness is supposed to be like a signature of West Coast IPAs. And then I guess they just put whatever gives off that citrusy grapefruit just to kind of dance around it and give it some depth. And then there's subtle hoppiness in there. It's in the middle when it's just kind of, you haven't swallowed it yet, but you're over the initial shock of the bitterness. It's definitely there. It definitely rounds it out. It's like a deburr, whereas think of the like in metalworking, you have the sharp edges. The bitterness and the grapefruit would be the sharp edges. They just punch you in the mouth. And then the malt is kind of behind that, and it's like a metal file. It deburrs the edges and makes them more round, so you don't stab yourself and have an unpleasant experience with the metal you're working with, and you don't cut yourself. Same thing with here, so you don't have a completely crappy experience. They give you a little bit of a malt undertone to kind of just smooth it out a little bit, but it's still a West Coast IPA. Full and full. Now, what would I rate this as? As an IPA, as a traditional IPA, I'm going to give 2 grades, and I might do this with stuff I don't really like from now on. 2 grades, just so I can give more of an objective opinion to people, which would be like stouts and IPAs, because man, those are hard to drink. But I'm going to drink them and I'm going to review them. As an IPA, like if I was drinking this in a competition and I was a judge, this would be a 4.5 out of 5 to me. It's nearing world class. They really knew what they were doing. It's easy to appreciate this beer and respect it for the trends that it probably set in the industry. I definitely taste the, why it's such an iconic beer. So 4.5 out of a 5. If I'm just grading it on what it is, an IPA. But I like to review these things to my personal taste. And my personal tastes are, I don't like hop forward beers, and I'm sorry for that. This is a B+ beer for me, and that is pretty high praise. I would make this a 3.75 out of a 5. That's high praise for me. An IPA getting a B+ would be, again, it'd be a 4.5 out of 5 for an IPA lover, I think. So who would I recommend this beer to? I would not recommend this beer to rookies at all. If you're just getting into craft beer, IPAs are not for you. The bitterness is going to be too overwhelming. You might want to harken it back and maybe try a pale ale if you think you've had a couple beers and you want to step into the bitterness scene. If you come from Scotch whiskey, if you like peat and stuff, you would probably like this. I think Scotch people and IPA people have a lot in common as far as palates go. So if you're a Scotch guy or a Scotch gal, you might like this Stone IPA. If you like traditional beers without the without all the hoopla, without all the gimmicks, without all the, everything you see in the industry today, I recommend this beer to you. This is a simple but very well brewed West Coast style IPA. And if you're a fan of IPAs, obviously, I recommend this to you. I think this beer should be drank by every IPA lover in the country at least one time. That's it. So my objective opinion that I think you should take more into consideration would be a 4.5 out of 5. But when I'm taking into consideration my own personal taste and what I like to enjoy, I would definitely make this a B+ beer, which is high praise for me, from somebody who does not like hop forward beers. It's a 3.75 out of 5. Until next time, guys, sorry this was so long. If you made it this long, God bless you. Cheers.